Are you actually serious right now? I stared at my stepdaughter Vanessa in disbelief, the words hanging between us like a physical barrier. Completely serious, she replied, arms crossed over her designer blouse. Dad would have wanted me to have the perfect wedding. And since he's not here to pay for it, the responsibility falls to you. I took a deep breath, trying to process what she was asking. Demanding, actually. My husband Richard had passed away 14 months ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer, leaving me to raise our twins, Max and Olivia, who had just turned 12. And now his 26-year-old daughter from his first marriage wanted me to sell our family home to fund her extravagant wedding to a man she'd been dating for less than a year. Vanessa, this house isn't just an asset. It's our home, mine and the twins. Where exactly would you expect us to live? I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. She shrugged, inspecting her manicured nails. You could rent somewhere smaller. The twins could share a room. It's temporary until you figure things out. That conversation happened 8 months ago, the first of many confrontations that led me to where I am today, standing at the back of an ostentatious church, watching my stepdaughter's wedding unfold with a document in my hand that would change everything. Richard and I had been married for 14 years. I met him when I was 30 after his first marriage to Vanessa's mother had ended in a bitter divorce. Vanessa was 12 then, the same age my twins are now, and I'd done everything I could to be a supportive stepmother despite her resistance. She just needs time, Richard would say whenever I came home crying after another one of Vanessa's cruel rejections. The divorce was hard on her. I gave her time, years of it. I attended every school event, helped with college applications, celebrated her achievements, and tried to include her in our family life after the twins were born. But Vanessa remained cold, treating me like a temporary inconvenience in her father's life rather than his wife and the mother of her half-siblings. When Richard was diagnosed, everything happened so quickly. Within 3 months he was gone, and I was left grieving while trying to help two confused and heartbroken children process the loss of their father. Vanessa, who had moved across the country for work years ago, flew in for the funeral and left the next day. I can't bear to be in that house without him, she'd said, not bothering to help with any arrangements or spend time with her half-siblings, who were desperate for connections to their dad. I didn't hear from her again until she called announcing her engagement to Bradley, the son of a prominent local business family she'd reconnected with at the funeral. The same call where she mentioned how perfect our spacious home would be for wedding photos. When I refused to sell our house, explaining that it would uproot the twins during an already difficult time, Vanessa exploded. This is so typical. You've always put those kids ahead of me, she shouted through the phone. Dad left that house to all of us, not just you and your precious twins. This wasn't technically true. Richard and I had owned the house jointly, and his will had left his share to me with the understanding that the twins would inherit it eventually. Vanessa had received a generous life insurance payout and Richard's vintage car collection, which she promptly sold. Vanessa, your father wouldn't want your siblings to lose their home, I tried to reason. Half-siblings, she corrected icily. And Dad would have wanted to give me away at my dream wedding. Since he can't do that, the least you could do is make sure the wedding happens the way he would have wanted. Despite my refusal to sell, Vanessa continued with her wedding plans, repeatedly hinting that I could do the right thing and at least take out a second mortgage. When that didn't work, she started asking for loans, suggesting I dip into the twins' college funds or cash out my retirement account. It's just sitting there anyway, she argued during one particularly heated phone call. And Bradley's parents are expecting a wedding that matches their social standing. I can't embarrass him with something cheap. I offered what I could afford, a modest contribution that would cover the flowers or perhaps the photographer. She dismissed it as insulting. The situation reached a breaking point 3 months before the wedding. Vanessa and Bradley came for dinner, ostensibly to discuss compromises on the wedding budget. The twins were excited to see their older sister, having prepared handmade gifts to congratulate her on her engagement. "We made these for you," Olivia said shyly, presenting a scrapbook of family photos that included several of Vanessa with Richard from when she was younger. Vanessa barely glanced at it. "Thanks, I'll look at it later." Throughout dinner, she discussed the wedding as if it were a corporate merger, all spreadsheets and vendor negotiations. Bradley mostly sat in silence, occasionally giving me apologetic looks when Vanessa's demands became particularly outrageous. The venue alone is $40,000, she explained, showing me pictures of a historic mansion. And that's before catering, which is another $35 per head with a minimum of 200 guests. That's more than I make in a year, I said quietly, aware of the twins listening from their end of the table. Well, if you just sell this place, it wouldn't be an issue, Vanessa snapped. It's too big for the three of you anyway. This is our home, Max interjected, his voice small but determined. Dad picked it out special for when we were born. Vanessa rolled her eyes. You wouldn't even remember that. You were babies. But we know the story, Olivia said. Dad told us all the time. How he wanted a big yard and rooms where we could all be together, but also have our own space to grow. Well, Dad would want me to have my dream wedding more than he'd want you to stay in some house you'll outgrow in a few years anyway, Vanessa replied dismissively. After the twins went to bed, clearly upset, the argument escalated. I'm not selling our home, Vanessa, I said firmly. I've offered what I can afford, and I'm sorry if it's not enough. But your father would never expect your siblings to lose their home for a one-day event. Fine, she said coldly, gathering her things. Then don't bother coming to the wedding. I don't want you there anyway, you or those two. You're not real family. Bradley looked uncomfortable. Vanessa, maybe we should. No, she cut him off. I've made my decision. If she won't help, she's not welcome. Dad would understand. With that, she stormed out, leaving Bradley to apologize awkwardly before following her. The formal invitation arrived by email the next day. A curt message stating that due to budget constraints and venue limitations, my presence and that of the minor children would no longer be accommodated at the wedding. As if we were furniture that didn't fit the floor plan. The twins were devastated when I had to tell them, not because they were particularly excited about sitting through a wedding ceremony, but because it was one more rejection from a sister they desperately wanted to connect with, one more severed tie to their father. Why doesn't she like us, Mom? Olivia asked, tears streaming down her face. I had no good answer. How do you explain adult pettiness and long-held grudges to children who just want to be loved? What happened next wasn't planned, at least not initially. 2 weeks after our invitation, I received a call from my neighbor Eleanor, a retired attorney who had been a close friend of Richard's and had helped us with various legal matters over the years. Jennifer, I just ran into Bradley's mother at the garden club, she said without preamble. She was going on about how generous you are for selling your home to give Vanessa her dream wedding. Said it was the most selfless gesture she ever heard of from a stepmother. My blood ran cold. I'm not selling our house, Eleanor, Vanessa asked, demanded. Actually, but I refused. There was a long pause. Well, that's not what she's telling Bradley's family. She told them you're closing on the sale next week, and the proceeds are her wedding gift. Bradley's mother is singing your praises all over town. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to make sense of Vanessa's lie. Was she hoping to pressure me by creating this false narrative? Or was there something more sinister at work? On a hunch, I called our family attorney, who confirmed my fears. Vanessa had been making inquiries about the house's title and Richard's will, specifically looking for loopholes that might give her a claim to force a sale. She doesn't have legal standing, he assured me. The house is yours, but the fact that she's looking into this is concerning. That evening, after putting the twins to bed, I sat in Richard's old office, surrounded by the remnants of his life, books he'd loved, photos of our family, the worn leather chair where he'd read bedtime stories to the twins. And I made a decision. The next day, I contacted Eleanor and asked for her legal expertise on a rather unusual plan. Over the following weeks, as Vanessa's wedding approached, I executed my strategy quietly and methodically. I received no further communication from her, except a formal wedding invitation sent to Mrs. Jennifer Carson and family 3 weeks before the event. Clearly a gesture meant for Bradley's family to see rather than a genuine inclusion. I RSVP for myself only, sending a polite note that the children have prior commitments rather than mentioning they'd been explicitly uninvited previously. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a modest navy dress, arranged for my parents to watch the twins, and drove to the historic mansion Vanessa had chosen for her ceremony. The venue was exactly as extravagant as she described. Floral arrangements larger than my dining table adorned every surface, crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and a string quartet played softly as guests in designer attire mingled in the garden. I took a seat near the back of the ceremony area, the envelope in my handbag feeling impossibly heavy. Several of Richard's relatives nodded in my direction, their expressions a mix of surprise and sympathy. They'd all received the same story about my generous gift of selling my home. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp Vanessa had dreamed of: 6 bridesmaids in champagne silk, a custom-designed gown with a cathedral train, and vows clearly written to impress rather than express genuine emotion. As the officiant asked if anyone had reason to object to the union, I remained silent. This wasn't about stopping the wedding. It was about truth. The reception that followed was held in the mansion's grand ballroom. I waited until dinner was served and the father of the bride's speech would traditionally have occurred. In Richard's absence, Bradley's father stood to offer words of welcome to Vanessa. "We're so happy to welcome Vanessa into our family," he said, champagne glass raised, "and we're moved by the incredible sacrifice her stepmother Jennifer has made to ensure today was everything Vanessa dreamed of. Selling your family home to give your stepdaughter her perfect day. There's no greater testament to family love than that." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's smile froze on her face as she spotted me at the back table. This clearly wasn't part of her plan. She'd assumed I'd be seated far from the main party, not witnessing this public acknowledgement of a lie. When Bradley's father finished, the event coordinator announced it was time for toasts from other family members. Before anyone else could stand, I rose from my seat, envelope in hand. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Vanessa's eyes widened in panic as I made my way to the front of the room. Bradley looked confused, glancing between his new wife and me. For those who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Carson, Richard's widow and Vanessa's stepmother. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "First, I want to congratulate Vanessa and Bradley on their marriage and wish them every happiness." I paused, making eye contact with Bradley's parents, who were beaming at me with approval. "I've heard there's been some confusion about a wedding gift from me," I continued. "Specifically, about the sale of our family home." Vanessa half rose from her seat, but Bradley placed a restraining hand on her arm, his expression darkening as he began to understand the implications. "I want to clarify that I have not sold my home to pay for today's celebration," I said clearly. "That home is where my children, Vanessa's half-siblings, and I still live. It's the home Richard and I built together, where we raised our family, and where his memory lives on in every room." The room had gone completely silent. Bradley's mother's smile had faded to confusion. "However," I continued, opening the envelope I'd brought, "I did make a decision about property recently. Richard owned a vacation cabin in the mountains that was separate from our primary residence. He and I spent our honeymoon there, and we took the twins there every summer. It was his special place." I withdrew the document from the envelope. "I've decided that this property should benefit all of Richard's children. So while I haven't sold our family home, I have transferred ownership of the cabin to a trust." Vanessa's expression shifted from panic to calculation, clearly assuming the trust would benefit her financially. "This trust," I continued, "will maintain the property as a retreat for families dealing with childhood grief and loss. It will be named for Richard and operated by the Children's Bereavement Center that helped Max and Olivia after their father's death." I held up the trust document for everyone to see. "The property belongs to someone else now, to children who need a safe place to heal, just as Richard would have wanted. I've made this donation in honor of today's marriage as my gift to the couple." The implications were clear. There would be no windfall for Vanessa, no property she could leverage or sell. Instead, her father's beloved cabin would help children like the half-siblings she rejected. Bradley's parents were the first to react, rising to their feet with genuine applause. Others joined, perhaps not fully understanding the subtext but appreciating the charitable gesture. Bradley himself looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. Vanessa sat rigid in her chair, a brutal smile fixed on her face as she realized her lies had been exposed in the gentlest, most public way possible. After returning to my seat, I stayed only long enough to finish my meal and accept genuine thanks from Bradley's parents, who seemed oblivious to the tension between Vanessa and me. As I prepared to leave, Bradley approached alone. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For not saying everything you could have." He glanced back at Vanessa, who was determinedly mingling with guests, as if nothing had happened. I didn't know about the lies regarding your house. I would never have gone along with that. I study his face, seeing genuine regret there. I hope you'll be happy, Bradley, and I hope Vanessa finds peace with whatever she's been carrying all these years. The twins, he said hesitantly. I'd like to meet them properly sometime. They're my family now, too. It was an olive branch I hadn't expected. They'd like that. 3 months have passed since the wedding. Vanessa and Bradley returned from their honeymoon to find their social circle well aware that there had been no sacrifice of a family home. Though most were tactful enough not to mention it directly. Bradley has kept his word about wanting to know his new siblings, coming for dinner twice and even taking Max to a baseball game. Vanessa hasn't joined him, but she did send birthday cards to the twins last month. The first acknowledgement of their special day in years. The cabin has been renovated to accommodate small groups of children and their families, with the first grief retreat scheduled for next month. The twins have helped with the preparations, picking out games and books they think other kids might find comforting. Do you think Dad would be happy about what we did with the cabin? Olivia asked me recently as we sorted through old photos for the retreat center's walls. I showed her a picture of Richard at the cabin, arms spread wide as if embracing the mountains behind him, his face alight with joy. I think he would love knowing his special place is helping children heal. I told her honestly. Your dad believed homes weren't just buildings. They were places where people could feel safe, loved, and remembered. Even Vanessa, Max asked, surprising me with his insight. Even Vanessa, I agreed. Maybe especially Vanessa. Last week, an envelope arrived in the mail. A check from Vanessa with a brief note, for the cabin trust. Not all dreams need to cost a fortune. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But as I deposited the check into the trust account, I recognized it for what it was, a small step across the chasm that had separated our family for so long. Richard would have understood.